excited to dive right in. Have you ever wondered why your med spa team seems like confused? Like you just can't figure out why they seem to miss part of their roles and responsibilities, or selling retail, or turning over their room and taking out the trash before they leave for their shift, right? So many different things. And you just can't figure out what you need to do differently in order to get your team to respond, to take action, to finally listen, and for permanent change to take place. Today, I'm going to be diving into how to properly set up your team structure to prevent confusion and to boost productivity at the end of the day in your med spa, right? That's what we want. That's going to remove the frustration and some of those fires that show up day to day. But before I jump in, I'd love for you to share in the comments section, right? What are some of those common things that you're seeing from your team that you just don't understand why they're not doing them? Why you have to remind them and ask them over and over again. Some of those examples could be like doing the laundry, right? Before they leave, rebooking patients, selling retail, recommending services that is outside of their department or scope of work, right? An esthetician recommending injectables or vice versa. What are some of the common things that you're seeing that you just wish your team could do? All right, so I'm seeing some recurring things and the different platforms of the examples that I shared with you. And I understand how it's all too frustrating at the end of the day, right? You feel like you're saying it over and over again. Well, today I would like to share with you some structure that could help prevent some of that confusion, right? And that will ultimately boost productivity in your med spa. So let's dive right in. So the very first thing that is an absolute must is that you have to have defined areas of role and responsibility for every single team member. Now, these have to be not only written, but they have to be trained on and then actually referred back to. It has to come full circle. Sometimes I see clients that don't have it written. Sometimes I see clients that don't have it clearly written, or it's not detailed enough exactly what that role and responsibility is. Or when they hire them, they may go over it once, but then they don't come back to it after that. So it needs to have clearly defined roles and responsibilities that you are coming back to and referring to at the end of the day. The next thing is a reporting structure. What I mean by that is you first need to have an organizational chart, kind of a chain of command and who you directly report to. And this is one of those things, as your team grows, can get a little bit tricky, right? At first, the business owner directly reports to them. But as you grow, it's so important for you to have an organizational chart, because at the end of the day, one person oftentimes isn't able to see and do all things. And so it's really important for people to have direct access that is regular, and they can get immediate feedback, support, help, and accountability. So it's important to have that organizational chart and that people can clearly say who their direct supervisor is. And I would tell you that this is a very common opportunity for med spas to implement quickly, because from that organizational chart, you also need to have one-on-ones, and you need to have documented escalation protocols. this is where we get into, I've told my team member or team to do, but it's just not happening at the end of the day. And so what next, right? I get that question a lot from med spas. It's like, I talk to them over and over again until I'm blue in the face. And this goes into the next phase, which is performance evaluation. This is where your roles and responsibilities and now benchmarks and KPIs come together, where you are reviewing numbers weekly, performance monthly, and then of course, big in-depth annual reviews. Now, some of those meetings are going to be short and quick. Some of those meetings are going to be talking about development plans. And then some of those meetings are going to have tougher conversations that involve performance improvement plans, otherwise known as PIP, performance improvement plans. This is where those tough conversations really need to be documented. And how I get, again, this question a lot of how to have those tough conversations so that ultimately change can take place. Most people aren't afraid to have a tough conversation, but I feel like they're not armed with the proper structure to be able to really get the result that you're looking for. So how I like to first start that conversation is to try to show some empathy and hear my team member out. Is there anything that you would like to share or that I should be made aware of why X is not getting done or not being met, right? Because there could be some circumstance that you don't know about that if you did, then it would change your perspective. It could help you to improve a system, provide training, support, a number of things, right? So you first want to do like kind of a pulse check and see, is there anything that you should know about as to why this role, this responsibility isn't being met? Ask that question because that could change the entire conversation. I can tell you that I have absolutely been guilty of just assuming the worst because something wasn't being done. And I skipped this first part of checking in with them and then come to find out there was a really good reason why it didn't happen. And then I feel like an asshole. So learn from my mistakes and first do that checkpoint to see if there's something that you should know, right? Now, once you do that, you want to really ask yourself, have I done everything to set this team member up for success, right? I've written and documented, I've trained on it. I've asked them, do they have any questions? Do you need any support? And I've done that more than once, right? And then after that, if they're still not being met and they feel supported, they feel like they've received the training, but they're just still not getting the job done, then that's when you need to put them on a performance improvement plan with clearly outlined expectations, training, and support that has deadlines in it, and that you are going to be checking in regularly. This is going to be documented so that you can refer back to it, so that when that deadline comes, you can be like, great job, these things were met, and we're moving on. Or unfortunately, if they weren't met, right, then, and you have clearly written, in essence, I don't like to use the word consequences, but a team member needs to know what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And in the event they cannot meet the role and responsibility, then these are the consequences, right? And that could look like a number of things, where you could pare back hours, and then ultimately, again, you can have strike policies like this is the second time we've talked about that, or you document the first time, then the second time. And that second time, you clearly state and share with them, we've documented this reoccurring or happening more than once. We've provided the support, the training, the feedback loop, and the behavior or the action isn't training. So unfortunately, and again, it's up to you if it's a 2 strike, 3 strike, no strike, right? But you need to verbalize them to manage their expectations, be very clear on your expectations. In the event they're not being met, then unfortunately, there may not be a place for you any longer at X, Y, and Z med spa, okay? And You don't need to yell. You don't need to be emotional about it. If you use this framework and process, it helps to take some of those emotions out. But before you go and blame your team, I will ask you to do a little bit of a gut check and ask yourself, have I done everything possible to set my team up for success, right? Do they know do they have a written role and responsibility that they have been trained on? Do they know who they directly report to? Am I doing regular meetings from a team to one-on-one basis where I'm evaluating their performance, putting them on development plans so I continue to invest time, training, money so that they can grow and develop? And if they are not meeting my expectations, their benchmarks, their KPIs, have I put them on a clearly written and communicated performance improvement plan? If you have done all of those things at the end of the day, that's when it doesn't really feel that bad at the end of the day when you got to let someone go, because you can know with confidence that you did everything possible to make it work with that teammate. But when you don't have a proper system in place and you're not really setting them up for success, you're relying on them. Well, I keep telling them to do it, and they do it for a while and then it doesn't change. And that's where it stops. Then I ask you to kind of reflect on your leadership and your system. Okay, and then the last one is cross-team collaboration. This is really when you need to rely on kind of those influencers or natural leaders within your department. This is where it takes a village to really run a sound, successful med spa, and it just not being one person at the head, because there may be team members within departments that are more of an expert than you per se. And I have that in my own organization, right? There are certain roles and responsibilities that I have team members that can do it better, that can communicate it better and teach my team and hold my team accountable better. And so we all come together and we support one another, and we allow leaders to step forward to bring up the overall culture and productivity of our company as a whole, right? So you need to identify who those influencers, those natural leaders within your team that are real experts on certain segments of whether it's a treatment, whether it's motivation, culture, patient relationships, social media, right? There's so many little things that has to be done in a business. And it's very hard to just rely on one person to be all of those things. And so we see so much more success within an organization when there's great cross-team collaboration. And I think that you first can be an example of that by first, one, having a really clearly defined patient journey where you are encouraging and mapping out and providing scripts and accountability to your team within the departments to work together. So for example, your front desk working with providers on welcoming and that transition into the consultation room and treatment room, and then checkout and retail, really mapping out, scripting that, and teaching your team how to work together. I can't tell you how that varies greatly from one med spa to another. Very rarely does it just naturally occur. Oftentimes you have different strengths of the front desk, a new patient coordinator, service providers, estheticians. And so if it's not something that's consciously talked about, planned, scripted out, and then held accountable, there is opportunity, money, appointments, or service that is being left on the table at the end of the day. And so those are all things that is going to give you the tools and the system to set your team up for success. Oftentimes I'll have a client ask me to review their staff and let me know if you don't think that person's a good fit, and I'll let them go. And I always say, before I would ever make a recommendation to let a team member go, I always say we first need to make sure that you have a system in place, that you have properly set up your team for success before you would ever let anyone go. Because here's the reality, guys, is that, yeah, sometimes you have just those A players that can step into any situation and make it rain. And we love those team members. But the reality is if you don't have a solid structure in place, that when you hire the next person, you're going to have the same challenges, the same headaches, the same, why do I have to keep telling this person over and over again? So it's really important that you have defined areas, first and foremost, of the role and responsibility, that you have a reporting structure in place, that you provide performance evaluations, and that you really work on cross-team collaboration. That's really going to help your culture as well. So I'd love to see in the comments, what is your biggest opportunity right now that you can take back and be like, I'm going to fix this within my med spa. I'm going to get the role and responsibility documented. Maybe you have it documented, but you're not referring back to it. Maybe you're not doing one-on-ones. Maybe you don't have a clear organizational chart. What I mean by that, and I have a client that has a practice manager, a new patient manager, and then all these providers. And in essence, I see toxicity between the new patient manager and the practice manager, and letting other providers and team members go to whoever they get the answer that they want to get from, and not really following an organizational. And it's a cancer to the culture, and it has drastically impacted their results and productivity at the end of the day. So it's really important that you back up that organizational chart and not let people go over their direct supervisor, because it really can shoot you in the foot. So, all right, so let's see. Dr. Pickens, following our check-in and check-out list, asking if they moved. Gotcha. Yeah, so you're saying that you're seeing challenges with not following, but kind of maybe some front desk roles and responsibilities. So my question would be to you, have you clearly documented the role and responsibility? I'm sure you trained on it once, right? So the next step is, what does that accountability and feedback loop look like? I'm sure you've talked to them, right? You feel like you have been blue in the face saying it over and over again. So then my next question is, have you put this team member on a performance improvement plan that is clearly documenting next steps, right? Like, if this was to happen, then like you got to come in early and get it done, right? If you missed it from the night before, or you need to make up that time, right? And if this continues to happen and you're not able to meet the role and responsibility, there may not be a place for you at our med spa. You're on mute if you wanted to comment.
Well, the quick answer is no. I haven't done anything that drastic. I do have a performance review that I will be going over. And before I do that, I'm going to be having some training probably after this call. I'm kind of wanted to be on it without them, so that I can get some tips from you and go over what do we need to do, kind of go over from the very beginning, just take out the paperwork. Let's go over it, because they're like, oh, we always do this, but they're not getting done. So go over it again. Yeah, keep going over it again and tell them.
Yeah, so what I would ask you is like, yeah, and I would ask him, I was like, it seems like this has been a reoccurring challenge. So do we need a start of day, end of day checklist? Do you need to verbally check out with me at the end of and I don't want to treat team members like children, but it makes me think of like the checklist as a mom, right? Before we go to bed, have you done your homework? Did you put your dirty socks in the laundry? Have you brushed your teeth? Have you read your books? Okay, great. I'll be in to tuck you in just a minute, kind of thing. But like, it's ridiculous. But unfortunately, if our team members are not like, that is the support, training, and accountability that can take place while being on a performance improvement plan. And if change still doesn't take place, you have to be prepared to follow through with the next steps, whatever those may be, right? But you got to have next steps. And again, I always come back to parenting. I have 4 kids. I have a big team. It always comes back to parenting, whether it's my kids, my team, or my clients, right? And advising them is like, how would you change a 13-year-old, right? And that's how we have to communicate with our team as well sometimes. And if you're talking, but then not following through on the consequences, they don't believe you, right? So many times I tell my clients this framework and they're like, I tried that, still nothing. And I was like, they don't believe you. They don't believe you that they have to do this because there's no consequences, because you let so-and-so get away with it. So they're not going to listen to you because they see other, it comes down to really just like following through and being willing to have those tough conversations and make those tough decisions. And it's only a few times that people have to feel like, oh, they're serious about this, right? But if you just continue to let it go on, you're literally just going to live a life of frustration, right? You'll have a few people listen to you, but otherwise they're going to know what you tolerate and what you don't tolerate at the end of the day. It's a tough thing.
And we can do this offline if it's taking up everybody's time. Yeah, I get the question about, you mentioned when you went to visit that spa, incentives. So my people ask incentives, incentivize. They want to be incentivized. What do they get if they sell retail? Or I don't know what the standard or the average is. I know what I've been paying, but if you can give me some clues on what is typical in the industry and what other kind of incentives, besides always cash. We may not always have cash.
Understand. Yeah. So this is one of those, I get this question so much about compensation plans. Help me build my compensation plan. Give me the best compensation plan. But guess what, guys? There is no one set compensation plan template that I can just give you that you can run with. Essentially, you need to have really sound financials and clean books to know what you can afford in your compensation plan, in addition to the role and responsibility of that person to make sure that it's a win-win for everyone. Now, you also need to clearly define the minimum expectation of the role and responsibility for which I pay you hourly or salary, right? And when you go above and beyond, examples of above and beyond, then this is the compensation model. But too often, med spas either way overpay and their margin is in the toilet with taking on all that liability at the end of the day. Excuse me. And so you have to have a really sound financials and clearly defined expectations of minimum standards, right? Until those minimum standards are not met, we can't even talk about additional compensation, right? So you got to figure out what is that minimum standard. And then when it comes to like retail, again, you need to hit minimum standards, and once they hit certain levels, then that commission can be increased and raised. And Dr. Pickens, I'd be happy to have a one-on-one conversation, because again, everyone's a little bit differently. Are we talking about an esthetician or an injector or a front desk or a new patient coordinator? All those things like vary greatly, right? Is it a team? Is it individual? Is it team plus individual? There's so many ways that you can compensate people financially in that way. It could be paid time off. It could be free treatments and service. It could be dinner, it could be coffee, gift cards. Like there's so many different ways that you can compensate your team. There's also like professional development and improvement. You have to figure out what motivates your team, because everyone is a little bit differently on what gets them motivated, right? What could be motivating for you would not be motivating for them. So that's when you really got to spend some time to get to know your team to see what makes them tick. And it's trial and error. at the end of the day. All right. But great question. It's a common question that so many med spas deal with. But I would also say that it's like a power struggle in the sense of they're asking for more compensation. And a lot of times the med spa owner is struggling with more compensation because they don't even feel like the bare minimum role and responsibility is being met, right? So it's like, wait, you want me to give you more, but you're not even doing what you are supposed to be doing to just receive your hourly or your salary. But when you look back at and have some honest self-reflection, oftentimes you don't have the system in place to be able to communicate that properly and hold them accountable. I will be back here next week. So if you love this training, make sure you share it with your team or another med spa owner that could benefit. You can catch the replay on my YouTube channel. We'll be sure to link that up, or go to my link tree. And to get access to more free trainings that will help your med spa grow, visit my link tree and join every Wednesday at 2:30 Central Time, same place on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and YouTube. Thanks, guys. Bye.